Hey, deserving listeners, 90 Day Fiancé. Let's watch.
It belongs to me.
Okay, you do need to take that.
Michael and I are married under Christian law in Nigeria. And when I'm in Nigeria, everything that Michael owns belongs to me as well. So technically, I do have the right to take Michael's belongings, especially his phone. I better bring that.
Bring this.
Yeah, well,
Yikes. I'm not sure what she means by that precisely, but just think about that, what she's saying. I mean, I think what she's reading is that people who are married, they own whatever they own together as a team, right? And thus, there's no separation, legally speaking. But of course, morally speaking, we understand that you can't just grab someone's phone because according to that definition, she owns everything that he owns and thus can take everything from him. His home, every possession is she can do whatever she wants to with. Like, it's really trying to figure out a way to justify her abuse. So it sounds like she's planning on, so I didn't show this, but she's going to Nigeria to see Michael. He doesn't know she's coming because she wants to surprise him so that she can grab his phone, look through it to see if he is cheating. You've heard me talk about this many times. There's nothing wrong with having fear that your partner is cheating on you. That's normal. I think all of us have it to some extent. Some of us with relational traumas have it a lot, particularly if they've cheated in the past, which Michael has. So there's nothing wrong with that. What do you do with that fear? Do you channel it into something healthy, or do you do something like this? And the thing I always think about is, okay, well, let's say you manage to trick him. You grab his phone. He doesn't fight for the phone back, which would be, of course, his right. But let's say he doesn't. You're able to scroll through and you don't see any evidence that he cheated. Well, then what? Because you've been cheating with someone online, which he will find out when he watches the show. 2, you have betrayed him and lied to him by showing up at his place, by grabbing his phone, by treating him like a piece of crap. So what is your outcome? If your outcome is to burn the relationship down, then just break up. Just let it be over. But if your object is,
we'll bring this. I don't want to treat my husband this way, but I need to uncover the truth in order to see if he's hiding anything to prove Michael's using me to get to America.
Yeah, she does this all the time. So there are glimpses where she's like, well, maybe this is going too far. But then she will say, well, what choice do I have? And that's what abusive people will almost always do. They will almost always, if not always, say, what choice did I have? What else would I do? The victim forced me to abuse them.
I'm having anxieties right now. Like, this could be goodbye, really. He doesn't care about people's feelings, but I'm to the point where you either step up and love me the way you said or go.
He doesn't care about your feelings. Doesn't care about. Do you care about his feelings? You don't let him talk. You've called him twice while on camera, and you yelled at him and verbally abused him the whole time, hung up on him, insulted him, called him names, swore at him. I think he got 1 or 2 sentences. Like, one sentence he said was like, calm down, and then something like, what are you talking about? And then that was it. I'm quite sure that if this is an accurate representation of what's actually happening in real life, that she went through a lot, she was abused a lot, she was neglected a lot by people who seemingly did not care about her feelings, and she is stuck in that place and determined to see Michael in that way by displacing.
Don't cry, because we don't need to be going down to Nigeria. I'm crying.
We've had our fights, but I never, ever imagined we'd be in this mess. If I found out Michael was scamming me, then that means our whole relationship has been a fake. And the most terrible thing is that he fooled me.
There's that theme of, you're going to make a fool out of me, in humiliation schema. That's the lens she sees the world through, I think. It's what explains a lot of her behavior. She thinks that she's constantly being made a fool of, I think because she was massively humiliated as a child, probably by her parents, I'm not quite sure. And she's always running away from the schema that she's inherently humiliatable. And the way that she tries to make up for it is to humiliate others, which of course only humiliates herself, which is something we all do. When we have a schema from mistreatment growing up, meaning that we're treated in a certain way and we derive a belief about ourselves and other people that is just not exactly accurate. We apply a rule that existed in one relationship or a few relationships to every relationship. We apply the way we were treated by a few people in our childhood as if that reflects who we are as human beings. And so we walk into adulthood assuming that that is the way that it is because it was the way that it was. And we need a way to defend against that schema because it's always nagging us. You know, this notion of like, you're an idiot, you're a fool, no one's going to love you. You know, eventually people are going to humiliate you because you're inherently ridiculous. And so you need a defense against that. And one of the ways we can defend against that is to get out ahead of it and humiliate others, reject others before they can reject us. And of course, that just perpetuates the humiliation and abandonment trauma because you're creating it yourself.
Do a strip dance for your mama. Oh, there you go. My clitoris is on fire.
Angela and I haven't seen each other since our wedding 2 years ago.
All right, interesting. So we're learning they haven't even seen each other in 2 years. And my hypothesis is that for Angela, her preoccupied and or disorganized attachment, which I can't know, obviously, but the presentation is in line with that, potentially, that due to not being able to see each other, it gives her anxiety, which is normal for anyone in that situation. And she can't check in. She doesn't have that reassurance that she can get when he is next to her, when he is there with her. And she starts to have some worries and maybe some paranoia, some distortions around him cheating. And then she convinces herself of that. Then she attacks him. Then he pulls away. And then they start to trigger each other and they spiral. So I think that's probably what happened. And a big question is, would the abuse from her stop if he and her were together after being married and were not challenged in that way? It's hard to know. I mean, usually that's not the case. When you have those kinds of issues, they usually will follow you around regardless of the situation. But, you know, think about Ariel and Biniam. I think that for them, that last season, they were together and thus didn't seem to be having the same amount of triggering for the two of them. So I don't know. It's hard to say.
Because my visa is still yet to be approved, so it's been really difficult for me.
Mike, how do you cope without seeing your wife for 2 years?
I really miss her, you know, but lately we've been fighting.
Well, you guys keep fighting.
You know, Angela is very hard-headed and she's always being in control of everything.
That has always been our problem with Angela.
All right, so we can use this as a jumping off point. Our analysis or conceptualization of our partners or anyone in our life that we're close to when we are hurt, when there's conflict, is often insufficient. It's often on the surface, like this is, in my opinion, because it's often when we are in conflict that we will label our partner in this way. Basically, he says hard-headed. Another word for that is stubborn. And then she's also controlling. And certainly you could apply those adjectives, but if you are really trying to improve things, it would be helpful if you at least also, but maybe in replace of, had a deeper conceptualization that was more accurate. Now, I don't know, Angela, but typically when we are seeing our partners as stubborn and controlling, what's happening is your partner is actually terrified of attachment loss and has no other way of coping with it. They are insecure. They might not exhibit that in a very obvious way, But controlling partners are often resorting to control because deep down they're very sure they're about to be abandoned or betrayed in some way, and they believe the only way they can retain attachment is through control. It depends on the situation. There are psychopaths and Machiavellian people out there, so there's that, but those are pretty rare individuals. Point is that when we have a more understandable and I think logical conceptualization of our partners, it gives us a direction as to how to actually address the problem. Because if we see our partner as stubborn and controlling, we will say, "You're stubborn, you need to stop it, and you need to stop controlling me." But it does. If my conceptualization of Angela is correct, that's not going to solve the problem, right? But if Michael saw it as, she gets really insecure, and that doesn't justify her controlling behavior, it doesn't justify her abuse of me, but I know how to cut to the core of the matter and solve the problem at times when I can reassure her, when I can tell her, look, I am not cheating on you. I love you. I want to be with you. The reason why I'm doing this is because of that. If you can really cut to the core, or maybe even address it more directly by calling her more often or texting her or something. I don't know. Now, a lot of people watching, including yourselves, might say Angela doesn't deserve that and, whatever. But we always use this as a jumping off point. And I would encourage you all to consider this when you're conceptualizing your partner. The other thing is that when you start to have those kinds of ideas about your partner that are really quite negative qualities in someone, you are controlling, you are stubborn, like you make a choice to be stubborn, you make a choice to be controlling of me, that basically is in the direction of you are a person who chooses to harm other people. And you could say that that's accurate, even of Angela potentially. But once you start to develop that idea about your partner, resentment can build, because it's hard to love someone and absorb love from someone and build love with someone that you have such a negative idea about, right? Now, I'm not saying you're not supposed to have the negative idea, because that's your choice, but just know that when you adopt that choice, particularly if it is debatable, you might be poisoning the well. You're putting flies in your own ointment and you're ruining your own chance of actually having love and the goodwill towards your partner, such that when there is conflict, you have a reason to actually try to improve things. You know what I mean?
We met Angela some years ago, and Angela has always been the boss from the beginning of the relationship.
Let me tell you something. I don't want y'all around them. You're a bad influence, and that one's special.
You're way too possessive and bossy.
And you know what?
Probably. And she is extremely insecure. I mean, that's what I see when I see her behavior. And I'm glad they're flashing back, because it's reminding us about the history here. I see someone who is so insecure that she feels threatened by Michael having friends who might actually be helping Michael to stand up to her, which she interprets as lack of control and more potential for Michael to leave her. That's what I see. It's not on the surface, and you have to kind of look for it. You have to kind of have faith that it's down there, because it's not. I mean, she does occasionally let us into that sort of, but that's what I'm seeing right now.
That's not your business. It's so funny.
Calm down now.
Is that
Stop
funny? Is that funny?
Now, of course, it's self-perpetuating, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in that the more you try to retain your closeness and your attachments through these methods, the more likely you are going to lose your attachments and thus have more reason to be controlling if you don't go to therapy and gain some kind of self-awareness.
She's been giving me a very, very tough time now. She told me she's gonna take care of me, but for the past some months now, she hasn't sent me enough money.
Why not just maybe get a job or something?
Well, when I started my visa process, she told me not to work, stay at home till my visa comes out.
Okay, so we're hearing more about that. I guess that's what we knew from the past, but there's a little bit more nuance there. He's saying that she did, in fact, ask him not to work And you could also imagine behind the scenes with the show that they probably get a little bit of money from the show. Sometimes I hear that the non-Americans don't get paid at all, but maybe they share the money. I don't know. Point is that it's been a couple years and they got married before the pandemic or right at the beginning. So maybe they thought, well, both of them thought, you don't need to work now because you're going to come to the States real soon. But then with the pandemic, maybe I don't know. Point is maybe there was some kind of a delay that they couldn't predict, and that's why he's not working. But anyway, so he said he can't pay his bills, and so he's asking her for money. I wonder why he would phrase it that way, give me $5,000 and I'll stop my Instagram. So, is that exactly how much he needs or something? I mean, I don't know.
My.
Angela doesn't want me to work because she's yet to trust me, 100%. So basically, Angela expects of me to be at home and also not to associate myself with friends because she sees them as bad influence to me.
Now, I don't know, but using it as a jumping off point, abusive individuals, often they are abusive because of attachment injury and their weird dysfunctional ways of trying to retain attachment, will abuse, control, coerce their partners in a variety of ways, including economically. There's a category of intimate partner violence that includes economic abuse, in that the abusive person will perceive and sometimes accurately, that if their partner, the person that they're controlling, the victim, if that person has money and also is in contact with other people, then the abusive person has less power and the victim has more power. And so the abusive person will actually go on a campaign to erode that power, possibly by forcing or coercing or manipulating or whining about the victim having a job. And so you try to get them not to have a job. In heterosexual relationships where the wife is the victim, sometimes this will also involve really trying to make sure that she's always pregnant, even though the husband, the abusive husband, isn't super interested in having kids. He's mainly interested in just keeping her dependent on him because he believes that if she's not, she will leave him. And it doesn't justify it, but it's often the case. I treated perpetrators for many years and people who were mandated to go to therapy because they were convicted of a crime of domestic violence, some sort of assault charge, and they were mandated to get treatment in the group that there were domestic violence treatment professionals and myself as a therapist was there to help with the psychology side of things. Anyway, point is that through my work with these perpetrators, I found that a lot of them were doing it because of attachment injury. And once I assessed that, we could actually help them with that, such that was the main factor that led to their controlling criminal behavior in the past. Anyway, point is that some of these individuals will isolate them from friends, isolate them from work, isolate them from money, and keep them home because, and it will be progressive. It'll start with, hey, I don't like that friend. Then it's like, I don't like those 3 friends. And then I don't like that one family member. And then a couple years later, the abusive person says, I don't like any of your friends. I don't like any of your family members. Or with economic abuse, it'll start with, hey, let me work. Let me pay the bills. And maybe take some time off. Or, don't get that promotion because, that'll be more stress for you. It'll start with that. And then it progresses to you don't work, you have no money, and you're never leaving the house, and you're completely under the thumb of the abusive person.
Black Range Rover. I pull up in an all black Range Rover.
I choose social media to make money because here in Nigeria, most people, they influence for products, for companies, and it gets well paid. But Angela does not like me to be on Instagram because she thinks I'm flirting with women.
Right. I think I was thinking that, or maybe someone suggested that to me, that he doesn't want to be on Instagram just because, and also to flirt with women necessarily, but also to make money. And it could be his career. It wouldn't be unusual, especially when he is in his home country, that the fastest way and the easiest way to make the most money would be to do this sort of thing. Now, he did say that he's building his audience. He hasn't really made money yet, but it is a path for a career that a lot of people on the show will pursue. I remember with Ed and Rose. Rose actually, I don't know how much money she made, but she did seemingly at least dabble in social media, YouTube, that kind of thing. And it's a good opportunity for people to make money in ways that they wouldn't normally. So he's saying that. And now it makes sense that she would be threatened by that. I mean, it doesn't make logical sense, really, but it is a common worry that people will have, that she's worried that if he's on Instagram, he'll be connected with other women will have the hots for him, and all, will comment, and that will be tempting to him. And if she has some sort of attachment insecurity, that will challenge her. On the other hand, if you are also interested in controlling someone, you don't want them to earn money. Like I was saying, you don't want them to have power. You don't want them to feel powerful. You don't want them to be empowered. You don't want them to be influenced by knowledge from the outside that would say, hey, Angela's being abusive to you. So, I don't know. What do you think is happening there? All right. Well, if you like what we're doing on this channel, you can become a patron of the podcast by clicking the link below. That's how you can really show us that you like what we're doing. Also, I am recently posting a bunch of episodes about apologies and forgiveness. I spent months researching the topic clinically and thinking about it personally, and I recorded a very long deep dive, I think on the order of 17 hours. And that might sound a little ridiculous, but there's a lot to get into with apologies because it involves so many different things. Through this deep dive and really 25 years of being a therapist, I slowly discovered that apologies are one of the main pillars of life in a marriage, in a relationship with a friend, in a relationship with your coworkers, between nations, between political groups, in your family. Apologies, a lot of things hinge on that, right? A lot of things are important factors that play into apology. You have to have self-awareness, you have to have empathy, you have to have mentalization, you have to have understanding, you have to have a bond, you have to have a way of apologizing, you have to give grace to other people, it's just so many different things. And if we can all apologize more often, more effectively, more vulnerably, and accept apologies, elicit apologies, then I think that life would improve in all sorts of ways. I don't know how to say it. Our relationships would be better. I think our coworker relationships would be better. We'd be more productive at work. I think that relationships between nations and political parties and, between you and your neighbors, I think would all be better. And there's so many barriers to apologizing well, and so many barriers to reconciliation and taking responsibility, really, right? I'm sure for yourself, you have a lot of apologies you wish you would have received, maybe even from your current relationships. And you probably have a lot of apologizing to do that you haven't done yet, but haven't done for various different reasons. Anyway, point is that I've done a whole humongous deep dive, and it's just for patrons of the podcast. I'm going to do a few other episodes that are available for free on YouTube, but I want to preserve the main bulk of it for the patrons because I can only do deep dives because of the patrons, because the patrons literally pay my bills so that I can spend months, 16 hours a day, because it really does take that long for me to get my notes together, to research, to da-da-da-da. So I'm really proud of this deep dive. I'm really glad I was able to do it, and I wouldn't have been able to do it if it weren't for the patrons. And so if you're interested in that, it would really, really help us out. I'm always terrified at that whole thing. My ability to pay my bills is completely dependent on patrons. And so at any point in time, so anyway, you could really help and make me feel a lot less afraid and a lot more secure in my ability to do these videos as well if you could become a patron. But if you can't afford it, totally cool. If you don't want to, totally cool. Everyone has to think about themselves. Also, if you can become an annual patron and or an upper tier patron, that's even more special to us. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.